in Russia, you have a case where the prime minister is the former president, and the president is in that job now because of the prime minister. Vladimir Putin chose Dmitry Medvedev in December 2007. He had a choice between Sergei Ivanov and Dmitry Medvedev. He went with Medvedev, who has been riding Putin's coattails now for 18 years, served as Putin's chief of staff, was chairman of Gazprom, worked with him in St. Petersburg, and since becoming president, and now almost 2 years, Medvedev has not appointed many of his own people to positions that matter. And so what that means is that a lot of the people around Medvedev are quote-unquote Putin people. And that means, I think, that Putin is still the one really ultimately calling the shots. Of course, as president, Medvedev has the power to dismiss the prime minister. He hasn't chosen to exercise that power in almost 2 years. I don't think he ever will. That would be political suicide, I think, for him. And you see Medvedev in many cases almost mimicking a lot of Putin's mannerisms and habits in his dress, including even the trip to Dagestan after the Moscow metro bombings, where Medvedev was dressed much like Putin has been seen. So people call it a tandem, people call it a triumvirate. I think it's a situation where if you want the ultimate decision on where Russia stands, then you have to get it from Mr. Putin. And Medvedev is not irrelevant. He is the president of the country, but I think the one ultimately calling the shots is the prime minister, not the president. I think all of us would like to see Russia become more democratic, would allow greater freedoms and liberties. I think since Vladimir Putin became president in 2000, we have seen a rollback of a lot of these freedoms. We have seen greater Russian government control over the media. We have seen pressure against oligarchs, the arrest of Khodorkovsky in 2003, the efforts to crack down on opposition figures, to keep them from campaigning and competing against Russian government-supported figures. So the trends in Russia are going in the wrong direction for those hoping to see Russia become more democratic. Unfortunately, I don't see that changing, despite the modernization campaign that Medvedev has launched. I think that's going to be a very difficult thing for him to implement, since I don't think it's really clear what he means by it. It's modernization mostly in the economic sense, less in the political sense, although occasionally Medvedev talks about some political liberalization, but so far he hasn't done any of it. And I think that's the biggest disappointment among liberals in Russia, who were hoping that Medvedev might represent some change and some new way of governing, and so far that hasn't happened. It comes back to the problem we were discussing earlier, which is Vladimir Putin is still in a position of significant power as prime minister, and as long as he is, I think the prospects of liberalization in Russia aren't very good. Medvedev has said he's not going to reverse the 2004 decision to eliminate election of governors, which I think was one of the biggest setbacks for democratic development in Russia. It reduces accountability of government officials in the country. The elimination of single mandate races in Russia also is set. It isn't a bright picture when it comes to democratization. And also the issue of corruption, I think, feeds into this, where the officials are going to do everything they can to try to maintain their positions so as not to avoid any problems with a new government that might come in. President Obama has invested a lot of time and effort in his relationship with President Medvedev. And he, at last count I saw, has spoken to him or met with him 14 times, which is probably more than he's met with any other foreign leader. Obama thought that Medvedev was key to finalizing the arms control agreement. Obama spent a lot of time with Medvedev when he visited Moscow in July. And yet Obama also mentioned, in reference to Putin before he went to Moscow, that Putin had one foot in the Cold War. It is proper for Obama to meet with Medvedev, to spend time with him, since they both are presidents. But it would be a major mistake, in my view, if Obama and his administration thought they could boost Medvedev or work with Medvedev in order to help him vis-a-vis Putin. That's a game that we don't know how to play. It's a game that if we try to play, we will lose. And we risk having Medvedev look like a stooge of the United States if there is too much of an effort to play Medvedev against Putin. So certainly the relationship between the two leaders has gotten off to a good start. The tone in relations is better. The rhetoric is better. And so far they seem to have gotten an arms control agreement done. But there's still a lot of work to do and a lot of issues that can mess up the relationship. And the question about Russia and Iran is a major issue. The possibility of problems with some of Russia's neighbors always looms as a potential destabilizing factor in the relationship. And other problems that could occur, energy cutoffs, cyber attacks against neighbors, all those kinds of things. The relationship at the end of the Bush administration was in bad shape. The relationship under Obama with Medvedev is better, but I think it is far too premature to conclude that the reset is a success. It seems to be having some effect, but let's see where we are at the end of Obama's 4 years in office.